Blame it on the girls who know what to do. Blame it on the boys who keep hitting on you. Blame it on your mother for the things she said. Blame it on your father, but you know he's dead. Blame it on the girls. Blame it on the boys. Blame it on the girls. Blame it on the boys.
So I guess I'm going to start with the history. When gaming started, it was definitely mainly made for men by men. Focuses on things like alien attacks, war, and role-playing, which would have been like saving the damsel kind of thing. Killing the big bad.
Well, that's what Zelda was all about. Go kill the big bad enemy to save the princess.
And
Mario,
Yeah.
Bowser really needed nothing except for the fact that he had spikes and just looked evil. That's all that really needed to happen.
Yeah.
So,
You knew who that guy was, you knew who the good guy was.
why don't you ask Noel your
I
first
know
question?
this, yeah. What were the first games you guys played as a kid?
First game I played was the original Zelda on Nintendo. My grandmother would take me to rent it every Wednesday. I stayed at her place she would babysit me, and we'd go to the arcade in Rutherford Mall and play games for an hour and then rent Zelda every single time. And that happened for like a year. I just kept playing it, so it was the original Zelda.
Did you have to start from scratch every time?
That was, you'd strategize where you kept your save file. It was like, I'll save it in the third slot because everybody wants the first slot, so when I rent it again, if anybody else rented it, hopefully my save game will still be there.
I never even thought about that.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
That happened a lot.
Yeah, mine was Nintendo 64 when we
Yeah.
rented it. Same thing. You were like, oh god.
Yeah, totally.
I never had to worry about that. I had PlayStation 1 and memory cards, right? So
Yeah.
I didn't have to worry about that stuff.
Did you rent games?
Did I rent games?
Yeah.
Oh, I rented a lot of games, yeah. But I used to just rent like Twisted Metal and stuff like that, or Bubble Bobble on PlayStation was such a good one. I loved that. It was the arcade one redone on PlayStation. That was one of my favorites, but yeah.
What was the first game you played?
First game I can remember, I used to PC game way back when, but the first game I can remember I didn't actually play, I watched, was Doom on computer. That was the first game. And I was so young, my dad would play that, and I'd hide behind his computer chair while he was playing Doom and shoot all the demons and stuff. And that game was awesome. So much nostalgia just from that game. So it's on DOS when you had to, it's the blue screen, you had to click Doom and click play Doom. That was sweet. Floppy disk too. So.
We used to go buy the demo discs, the demo floppy disks, and hope that they would work. The whole goal was just to try and make it work on the computer. It wasn't play it. It was just like, hey, can I get this running? That was it. That was all we did.
Wow.
It was more of a challenge.
Yeah, it was. It definitely was.
It took a lot more commitment to be wanting to game back then, where it wasn't just like, oh, I can just pick up a game, throw it in, and go.
Yeah.
Which I think is why the Wii is such a big seller with families. Even more than the game focus is the fact that you can just literally turn it on, push a button, and go.
Very
Yeah,
simple.
and all the choices that people have now, it's ridiculous. There has never been so many choices for gaming.
Well, that's what I think, like, back then when games, there was so much, like, when a game came out, there wasn't as much variety, so when a game came out, you would appreciate it way more, because you're like, oh, this game's about killing some monster thing, sure, okay, cool, I'll like it because it's all I got, you know?
Yeah.
Back nowadays, though, it's like 5 games that do that, so you pick that one, and the rest suck now, so...
Yeah, you pick out the best one, and there's no point. There's no room for less than the best to play and to put your time into.
I think a good example of that is the apps too. On like, you go to an app store or anything like that, and you'll find your one game, but you try to search up, let's say, Angry Birds. You're gonna find all these clones that almost are Angry Birds but aren't, and it's just because it's all about money now. It really is. There's no passion in it, unfortunately.
No, there's very little. A lot of it's been lost.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if it's just because we're older and have more money, or if kids nowadays are still doing the thing like, I remember being a kid, you got one game and you played that game and that's the only game you had to play for like that entire period and you beat it, you might play it again. Now it's like, you buy a game, you'll play it for like 3 hours, you grab another game, you're going to play that for 3 hours, you're going to pick up another game. I'm curious to know whether or not it's more like kids are kind of like what we were when we were kids, it was just a money issue, or if it's more of like a variety of games and how fast
I
they're
think it's
coming
probably
out now.
both. I think money still plays a part in it, but there's with the variety that there's parents are more, well, with the idea that you can trade games into companies to get other games, it perpetuates having more games, and I think kids feel like a little bit more spoiled now to have this variety and choice. So it's
I think there's a lot more cheap games, like games get cheaper a lot quicker, and like I don't remember really ever had there being discount bins for games.
No.
It was like a game existed, then it sold out and it just disappeared.
Yeah.
I wasn't
It
like
should seem more common.
maybe it was just the fact there was no like EB Games where you would stockpile these old games. When a game was gone, like any other product, it disappeared and it was gone. So
Games are also more expensive then too. They retailed at 80 or more,
yeah,
and now it's 60 or less. So
And as the internet grew too, I mean, it became easier to find games off the market, right? So
yeah. that's
before, when the internet wasn't doing as much of the online selling stuff, I mean, back in the 90s, it was way harder to find games too. So
Just trading with your friends.
yeah, exactly.
have you played any games, or do you know a first game that you played that had a female protagonist?
Oh man, you want to go? I don't.
First
I think-
game I played with a female protagonist would probably, it wasn't even a main character, but would have been, we were talking about this game earlier, Where in Time is Carmen Sandiego.
Oh yeah,
Carmen you don't play as.
Yeah.
About probably close to, if not a third, half the agents that you play as were girls. That's actually a really good example of a game that it didn't really matter what the gender was. They all had their like cliche thing, but they didn't have like the cliche of like the beefy guy, the nerd, the girl. It was like there was the nerdy girl, the adventurous girl, the nerdy guy. Like there was much more variety that way. So.
One that sticks out to me, and I know you've heard me talk about it before because it's my favorite game, is Final Fantasy VI. Had Terra as the protagonist. However, with that said, that has such a plethora of characters, and they're all very central characters. It's not like she stood out and is the main character.
But you did play as her, though.
You did
so
play
that's-
as her, and she was central to the story, just so well put together that she did stand out a lot more than all the other characters. So
I'm in a place where like I purposely would choose not to play as a girl. I was like, unfortunately, that person that didn't want to play as a girl, because I want to play as the guy that I can realistically be and think about in my head.
Mm.
But playing as a girl always really confused me. I wouldn't even play as Samus in like Super Smash Bros. Or anything like that because I knew Samus was a girl, right?
Yeah.
And it's not like I hated Samus. I love Samus as a character. I just didn't ever want to play as
I guess
Samus.
you
You know?
did you ever like? I guess Metroid would have been the first one I played with a female protagonist. But
I
you
never
didn't
knew
know
Metroid was
that.
a girl, right?
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
I did play the
So-
Game Boy version, Game Boy, like the old Game Boy Black and White of Metroid, but I wouldn't say that's my first because I thought it was a guy. So.
Yeah.
My first, honestly, would probably be like Heavy Rain. Like
Yeah.
that's probably my first game where I played as a girl. And you don't even play as her all the time. Just that one couple sections you play as a girl, and like, wow, like.
Thinking back, I played it was on the Game Boy Color, but I played Tomb Raider a lot as a kid too. It's a terrible version, but I liked it because it was all I had. But
no, I never did that. Like, yeah.
yeah, but I think it also back in the day, like if you go back far enough, a lot of the characters when they were sprites, I think it was less important that it was girl or a guy because you couldn't really tell necessarily. You'd have like
I'd agree with that.
maybe a color scheme if there was color or
It's more dialogue.
dress versus pants, but for the most part, if they made a general character, you couldn't really tell guy or girl. It could be really either one. So.
Well, that's when it was mainly dialogue that really fleshed out like a character, right? And that's why in Final Fantasy I think it works so well, is because like you're getting all the characters down by just what they're saying, right? I mean, like Final Fantasy 4, there's so many characters in it, and like so many people, and same with 6 as well. And like and they all just get hashed out into these certain stereotypes of what they are, but none of them are what you would see a girl character today in video games, you know? Like, I mean, even if you argue that to, like, Lightning now in Final Fantasy, it's like, wow, there's so much more depth to the other characters from way back when, because it's so much more text.
Yeah,
And so much more of
very
what you
story
took
heavy
in.
and
Yeah.
backstories and stuff. Now it's all graphical.
They were forced to. I
It's-
mean, if
yeah.
you look at the
Yeah,
graphics of, like, the old Final Fantasy, it's like, oh my god.
There's not
Like,
much you could do with it.
mhm.
They didn't have the opportunity to have smooth pixels and
Mhm.
big busts and things like that. It's what they're all focused on now. Is big explosions and more graphics and more horsepower to make it look better.
I think they're too worried about girls in gaming, though. I honestly think video game companies are almost overthinking it or thinking it too much and just worrying about what their characters are going to be. Because, like, even in Battlefield 4 and Call of Duty this year, both of them incorporated women.
Yeah.
Call of Duty this year incorporated women characters in online, which you can create and customize and stuff. And that's fine. They actually didn't really do too much craziness with it, but you can just tell they were worried about it, so they like kind of threw it in there. And the single player campaign also has a woman in it for Battlefield, and for that again, like it's just even in the trailer, like one of the guys is like, "Oh, I don't trust her" or something like that. Then she like I don't know, kung fu kicked some guy in the face, and then I was like, "Oh no, she's cool now." And, like I'm just like they're obviously thinking about it too much that they're
Yeah.
like throwing that in there for the people who are like wondering and waiting for it, you know.
What was that
Just-
game that had to fight to get the female protagonist? It was a flop.
Was it the
Recently it came
hydrophobia one or whatever?
No, it wasn't
That was a
hydrophobia,
random
but it was. What are you using me for? What was my real
Oh,
mission?
so Remember
That
Me.
game.
Ironically,
Yeah.
I remember me.
But they had to fight to get her as a protagonist,
Yeah.
didn't they? I think the company, their parent company, didn't want them to do that, and they're like, "No, that's what we're doing." Like,
Right. Yeah, and then other games, like even the Assassin's Creed series, I love them because they are very diverse, but they are very afraid to put a female protagonist into it. I mean, even Assassin's Creed 3 had some great things to it because you played as so many main characters, but you didn't play as the mom. There's a moment in the loading screen where you play as a mom and you're running around the loading screen as his mom for a second there while she's pregnant,
Yeah.
but you never get to play a scene as her pregnant. I was like, why? Like, you were almost there. You even character modeled it for the controls, but then they took it out and you now play as him when he's a kid. And I was like, oh, there's so much potential there, and they're obviously afraid of it. They're one game they made where you're a female protagonist on the Vita. It's like,
Yeah, it's
they didn't even try to really go for it.
they didn't want to commit an entire year to a female protagonist, I
Of
think,
course.
where they could kind of put a back burner female, then we have a female protagonist kind of thing.
I think the Assassin's Creed game is one of those games where you could easily switch the main character many times, and that's like the one game where you could get away with putting a female character into it for a good 3 hours of the game or so, you know. And I think Last of Us did it really, really well. But even they were under constraints on like what they were going to do with their females and like how they wanted to portray all the females in it. So
It's almost like the cliche, especially I find in shooters, that if you have a female character, what is she? She's the bitchy, hardcore Michelle Rodriguez-y character,
course, yeah.
where that's her role. It's they're either going to be portrayed as hardcore or like an annoying mall hoppery kind of look, but
or she's the point of the story. She's the
Yeah.
reason he's shooting so many people because she died or something, right?
Yeah,
You
no,
go to the
it's-
he
Max
couldn't
Payne
protect
story.
her, is what it was.
Yeah.
like, almost every time.
The Max Payne thing. The only reason he's able to shoot all these thugs is because his wife was murdered. You know, it's
Yeah.
like
yeah.
it's overused so many times. Like it's nice to see realistic women sometimes in games when they finally get it right.
On the other hand, I can see why they're not going to make it the focus. Working, you see that it's not a heavy female draw, so why make a video game for that? More than, I think what a lot of people are fighting for is like, oh, we need to have female main characters, we need to have all these females in the game, they need to be, I want to play as them. Now that's one option, but on the other hand, you're just, unfortunately, a small percentage of
Yeah,
gamers.
look at your actual market. I mean, it's not like they just do these things without thinking about it. They spend millions upon millions looking into marketing and who's going to buy their games, and
Exactly.
it's a huge, huge risk for them to spend millions of dollars making something for somebody who's not likely to buy their game in the first place,
Yeah,
just to try
be
and draw them
politically
in.
correct, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was Call of Duty that recently stated that they're actually almost getting close to 50% women playing their games now.
Oh,
I was
really?
like, that's insane. It's the reason
That's
why
a
they
lot.
added women
It's
into
a
the
hard
game.
stat for me to believe even.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah.
It's the number. I'm sure it's in the 40s somewhere, but it was incredible to see that. I was like, wow, there's actually a lot of women playing Call of Duty, which I know is a lot of women gamers. It's not a shock about that. It's just the fact that they are playing Call of Duty. So like, obviously they're gonna have to adapt now. Like instead of making it just a guy gamer base, right?
It's
So-
hard to believe that statistic for. I mean, I only say that because when I play, the only game I play online now, as you know, is The Last of Us.
Of course, yeah.
And playing a lot of it online, I've only run into like 3 female gamers. All of, and I think it was the same one, 2 different sessions in her group of 3 other guys that she
That
played
one that
with
keeps
all
floating
the
around all the
time.
matches. Yeah.
So, but it's very, very rare. I mean, if you've ever played online with mics, how often do you hear a female chatting with
It's
you?
so true.
I think a
At
lot
the
of
same
female women avoid using the mic though.
Yeah,
because-
you're
Exactly.
probably right.
Yeah.
I could see that.
But once they do, you know what's gonna happen, right? And it gets annoying. So.
And I guess that it's not a proper representation. That just to say I've only heard 1 or 2, because now that I actually say it and think about it, it's less than half the people actually use mics. So
Of course.
it's
But still, you're right though. I mean, I think more the vocalized gamer though probably is male.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Yeah.
you know, you never know. But still, most of the gamers that are gonna probably slap on the headset and stuff like that are probably
I
gonna
wonder
be
how they
male.
get that statistic.
And
I mean, it's obviously become a lot more common for women to play video games. That's been apparent for the last like 10 years even. Women playing more of the games that you would assume men play is becoming strangely more and more common.
You've gone to lots of like Comic Cons and things like that. You see an endless number of females dressing up as video game characters.
Yeah, when you go to a con,
obviously
especially
fans.
cons are almost like I think they're almost closer to 2/3 girls. There's way more girls, at least at anime ones, than.
Well, at a video game con, like you cannot categorize anybody. So you go to video game con and you will see every type of person. Is where so you really cannot stereotype anything when you go to a video game convention because everybody is playing games. It's especially these days. It's ridiculous. So yeah, when you go to con, I think it becomes really clear. And you're like, wow, it's huge now. Like it's as big as movies. You know?